children, and welcome to Bible Adventures with me, Aaliyah Rex.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
So today on our Bible adventure, we'll be talking about a very famous man, one you've probably heard of. We're going to talk about Moses. In the book of Exodus is where we'll be reading. And during this time, the Israelites were slaves to Egypt. And so they became so numerous, they had so many Israelites that Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, was afraid that they would become too much in numbers and overthrow Egypt. So he decided to kill all of the baby boys. So now we'll be reading in Exodus beginning in chapter 2. Now a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. Now the tribe of Levi was a part of all the tribes of Israel, okay? And she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. Now she hid him because Pharaoh was out trying to kill all the baby boys that the Israelites had, okay? But when she could not hide him any longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. So basically she's coating it so that way it can float on the river. Then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. And when Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the river bank, she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slaves to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. So then the baby's sister asked Pharaoh's daughter. She said, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" And she said, "Yes, go." So the girl went and got the baby's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." So the woman took the baby and nursed him. And when the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." So therefore Moses, he was going to be killed by Pharaoh if they had found him. So his mother sent him adrift in the river with crocodiles. But luckily, Pharaoh's daughter found him. Not only did Pharaoh's daughter find him, the sister spoke out to Pharaoh's daughter, seeing an opportunity for the mother to be then reunited with him. So now Moses is all grown up. He's out watching his people work away because they're all slaves and they're in the mud and stuff and making bricks and whatnot. And he's sitting there watching them. And then this Egyptian beating this Israelite. So Moses got really mad. So he killed the guy. Pharaoh did find out that he killed this guy. So then Pharaoh tried to kill Moses. But Moses ran away. And he ended up going to this place called Midian. So Moses in Midian, he was at this well. And there were a couple of these girls at the well also. And they were trying to get water. And these shepherds come up and start bothering the girls, okay, and being mean to them. So Moses came to the rescue. And so the girls were so grateful, they went and told their dad about it. So their dad welcomed Moses and then gave him one of his daughters to marry. So now we're going to read in Exodus chapter 3. And starting with verse 1, it says, "Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire within a bush. And Moses saw that the bush was on fire, and yet it did not burn up. So Moses thought, 'I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up.' So when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, 'Moses, Moses.' And Moses said, 'Here I am.' And then God said, 'Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground.' Then he said, 'I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob.' At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, 'I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering.' So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now the cry of the Israelites have reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Moses didn't really understand why God was asking him to do this. And he had a lot of questions, and he asked, when they ask who sent me, what should I say your name is? Because the Egyptians, they worshipped hundreds and hundreds of gods with all different names. So he, was kind of confused and wanted to know, what name God had. And so in verse 14, God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. And so that's why God is known as the great I am, because that's how he revealed himself to Moses, to know that he is unchanging and he is everything that could ever need. I am who I am. So then Moses kept questioning God, because God would say one thing, he's like, but what about this? And then God would answer that, and he's like, but wait, what about this? And God would answer him, but he kept going. And so God showed him all these amazing things. He had leprosy appear on his hand and then healed him. He had his staff turn into a snake. Even after all this, Moses was still like, nope, send somebody else. So then at that point, God was like, okay, Moses, here's the dealio. All right, this is still your thing, okay? But you have a brother named Aaron, and he talks pretty good, okay? So you guys will work as a team, all right? He'll do all the talking. All right, but you do all the miracles and stuff that I showed you how to do, okay? We'll read in Exodus 5. It says, Afterward, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness. And Pharaoh said, Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. After they asked that, Moses was like, man, these people are lazy. I'm going to make them work even harder. So Moses was like, God, why would you let this happen? And so God's response is in Exodus chapter 6, verse 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of his country. So they tried asking Pharaoh again, and he said no. And then in chapter 7, verse 14, it says, Then the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is unyielding. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he goes out to the river. Confront him on the bank of the Nile, and take in your hand the staff that was changed into a snake. Moses is performing the first of 10 plagues. They confronted Pharaoh. And again, he was like, no, I'm not letting your people go. So they turned the river into blood. It just didn't turn red. No, it was blood. Hot, sticky, nasty, stinky blood. And so there was blood all throughout Egypt. It wasn't just the big Nile River there. It was all the streams, the creeks. So the second plague then was frogs. And there were frogs everywhere. Frogs in all their houses, and their bathtubs, and their beds. Yeah, there were a lot of frogs. It was nasty. And then after that, the third plague, God sent a bunch of gnats. And if you've ever had gnats in your house, while you're trying to eat something and they fly in your mouth, it's disgusting. And they were everywhere. Nasty. The fourth plague was flies. So not only did they have to deal with gnats, then came along flies. In the fifth plague, God made all of their livestock die. So all of their cows and sheep, all the animals that they used for food, just rolled over and died, okay? Dead cows everywhere. Pharaoh still wouldn't let them go. So God sent the sixth plague, which was boils. Basically, these are giant zits all over your body. These irritated, red, pus-filled lumps, okay? Completely covered the Egyptians' bodies. On the bottoms of their feet where they couldn't even walk. It's gross. So after that, guess what? They still didn't let him go. So then was the seventh plague. And so God sent this big storm, the biggest storm Egypt had ever seen. There was a bunch of thunder and lightning and giant hail raining from the sky. And if you don't know what hail is, it's basically a giant salt rock. okay? Like giant boulders falling from the sky. Okay, so if that wasn't enough, then came the 8th plague, which were locusts. Now, how locusts are a bit different than the other bugs that God sent. They are almost like pests because they eat anything and everything, okay? So when these locusts came through, they ate all the food in the fields. Like everything they had been growing, all of their crops were completely destroyed and eaten through by the locusts. Even the fruit on the trees, if you had some apple trees or like a peach tree, done for, okay? All the fruit and food was gone because these locusts destroyed it all. So, and then after that came the 9th plague. And then this was a plague of darkness. And now I'm not just saying it was just night for 3 days. No, it was darkness. Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Is anyone out there? I can't see.
Hello.
At nighttime, you still have, the stars in the sky and the moon, and like you can light a candle or turn on a light or something. Like there's ways to still have light at nighttime. Okay, but this was darkness, complete darkness. You couldn't even see your own hand in front of your face. For 3 days, it was like at a standstill. You couldn't move or do anything because that's how dark it was. So then after that, finally came the 10th plague, okay? And this one's a biggie, okay? So this is God talking to Moses and telling him what the dealio is for the 10th plague, okay? And this is in chapter 12 of Exodus, and I'm going to read it verse 12. On that same night I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals, and I will bring judgment on all gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. So this is what is known as Passover, okay? Basically, God is sending this death angel to pass over all of Egypt. So they had to sacrifice this lamb and paint the blood over and around and on the sides of their doors. Alright, and so that way when this death angel passes over, no one will be harmed in their household. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was a loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. So finally, Pharaoh said, you guys can go. Leave. Go away into the wilderness. Yay, yippee. All the Israelites get to pack up and leave Egypt because they're like, yay, we're not slaves anymore. As they're traveling, Pharaoh changed his mind. He was like, what did I just do? Who's going to do all this work now? Because I ain't going to do it. So he got all these men and in their chariots, and they're chasing after the Israelites to go get them back. All the Israelites were mad at Moses because they're like, oh, look, we hit a dead end. We're at the sea. What are we supposed to do now? Swim? That ain't gonna happen. Moses cried out to God and was like, what am I supposed to do? And he's like, and God was like, keep going. And he told Moses, to go into the water and to raise his staff. And he completely split the sea and let a passageway over to the other dry land. So as they're passing through, the Egyptians are running after them. It wasn't until every single Israelite was on to the dry land, God decided to close up the Red Sea. And guess what? When he closed it up, all of the Egyptians were still on that pathway. So every single one of them drowned and died, including Pharaoh. That is where we'll end with Moses today, with all the Egyptians drowning and dying. Which is good, I guess. So that is the end of our Bible adventure today, children. I hope you all enjoyed.
In the beginning.